Ever said no when you know no wasn't the right answer? We talked about that last week. There's been several times that we've missed opportunities, great opportunities, and then this little voice in the back of our head said, "Yeah, we need to do that." We said no, and then later there was a lot of regrets. Man, this just it blows me away how relevant some of the, or all of it, but especially some of the stories, they just relate to us in such a powerful way. There was a king. Paul had been sharing the gospel, talking to him about his story, his life story, and in the story of Jesus. And that king said, "You're not going to persuade me to become a Christian in such a short time." And but Paul knew that he understood. And that king went on and said no to Jesus, the biggest decision that you could ever make. And we don't ever have a record in Scripture of him coming back. So what does that got to do with any of us? Well, I'll tell you what it's got to do with us is that the biggest decisions in our life are going to be the ones that affect where we go on the other side of our last breath. In other words, heaven or hell. How we cope with all of our hurts, habits, and hang-ups, right, in this life. It all rests on one decision, and that is decision to invite Christ in your life. And so, I've spent a long time. I've been a believer since I was in my early 20s, and I have really noticed through Scripture, and I've noticed in my personal experience that people, even though they know, and you that are listening to me today, you know that you don't need to push Jesus away. You know that hollowness that you're feeling in your life is a result of saying no to Jesus, right? And you know that's not the right decision. Why do we do that? One, I told you last week, one of the reasons we do it is because we are just scared of other people's opinions and what it might mean, who we might lose. Today, though, I want to tell you a very common one. And the common one today is pretty spooky. It's another P word, but it's pride. Pride it comes in a lot of forms and it comes in a lot of packages, right? But pride is really the unwillingness to admit we need help. It's that unwillingness to reach out to the true source of help, which is Jesus. Because that's going to involve us saying and doing some things. The perfect picture of pride is mentioned in the book of Luke 18. Two men went up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee and the other was a tax collector. In other words, he's rough, he's messy, he's a sinner. And the Pharisee stood, the old preacher there, Jewish preacher, stood up and prayed. He said, "God, I thank you that I'm not like this guy, a robber, an evildoer, adulterers, this tax collector, this sinner." And from that scripture, it's a perfect picture of what pride ultimately does to us, right? Pride does two things. Pride always makes us compare ourselves and our situation, our sin, to someone that's just a little bit worse than us, right? Always. What do we say? We say things like this when we know we messed up and we know that we need to call on Jesus. Well, I may be bad, but at least I'm not as bad as, and then you name this guy, right? Well, I know I'm bad, but and I made a mistake, and I'm not doing right, but by golly, I'm not as bad as whoever. But the other characteristic of true pride that stands in our way, ultimately, is compensation. And I see people do this all the time. Instead of just simply admitting they're wrong, it's simply admitting and going to Jesus and saying, "You know what, you're right, I'm wrong. I'm not making the right choices. I keep saying no when I know no ain't right." Compensating, right? So we can embrace our messiness as long as we equal it out with something good. I saw my kids wrestling, when they was young. We're from Texas. We wrestle here. We don't wrestle. And Macaulay broke Micah's leg. Micah broke Macaulay's leg. Macaulay was 2 years old. I heard it snap 3 rooms away. And so when I went in there, and I said, "What in the heck?" Because his bone, his leg's all twisted. And here's what Micah said. He said, "Dad, we were wrestling, and Macaulay broke his leg, and I said, 'Did you do it?' And he said, 'Yes, sir, but I helped him up.'" That's what Micah said. That was the way to get out of confession. That was the pride talking right there, man, right? So why in the world do we behave that way when we know no ain't right? Why do we keep pushing when it's very obvious that we are messy people, man? We make bad choices. And the worst choice that we will ever make is to say no to Jesus. You know, this morning, this afternoon, none of us perfect. I get that. But all of us got something that we're struggling with. A hurt, a habit, a hang-up, right? Why aren't we just having that conversation with Jesus? The bottom line is that Jesus is waiting for you to call out to him. If you've never done that, you've had that on purpose on your own personal experience with Jesus. If you've never done that, I pray that you will do something as simple as admit you got a problem. Admit you need Jesus. Ask him to change you and to forgive you. And the bottom line, at the end of the day, is he will. God bless you.